Hello, I don't know if you can tell right now, but I am not an actor, and I have actually never hosted a show before. But today, I'm stepping in front of the camera to do what Joseph Campbell once said. If you follow your bliss, doors will open for you that wouldn't open for no one else. So tonight, I am gonna be your host, as we explore together the legacy that Joseph Campbell has left, as he has influenced everything from stories in books to comic books to motion pictures of today. So welcome, my name is Matias Barbero, and I will be your host as we take a look at Joseph Campbell's career and life. Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell was a masterful storyteller. He could merge tales from every corner of the world into spellbinding narratives. Joseph Campbell became the foremost popularizer of comparative mythology and religion in the second half of the 20th century. Now, let's take a look at how he got to this point. Joseph Campbell was born on March 26, 1904 in an upper-middle-class Roman Catholic family. He was raised in White Plains, New York. His story starts when his father takes young Joe Campbell to see the Indians in the Buffalo Bill Wild West show in 1912. And Joseph's lifelong interest in Native Americans is born at the Madison Square Garden. In 1913, the Campbell family moved to New Rochester, New York. Joseph's interest in Native traditions led him to read through the entire collection of the Indian mythology in the children's section at the public library. And when he turned 11 years old, he was admitted to the adult section of the library, so he could keep reading on the Indians. Joseph devoted himself to learning every available fact about the Native American life, including the reports even from the Bureau of American Ethology. In 1919, a fire destroyed the family home in Rochester, killing his grandmother and destroying his entire collection of Indian books and relics. But this small incident did not slow down young Joseph. He enrolled at the Canterbury Prep School in New Milford, Connecticut, where he was right away writing articles about the Native American mythology. In 1921, he graduated. After high school, he enrolled on the Dartford College, where he studied biology and mathematics. Quickly, he realized that that was not for him, and he transferred to Columbia University, where he received a BA in English literature. During college, he actually played in a jazz band on weekends, and at the same time he was a very accomplished athlete, receiving awards in track and field events. And for a time, he was among the fastest half-mile runners in the world. In 1924, Joseph traveled to Europe with his family. On the ship back from Europe, he met Jiddu Krishnamurti. With Jiddu, they discussed Asian philosophy, sparking in Campbell a new lifelong interest in Hindu and Indian thought. In 1925, he earned his Bachelor's of Arts degree from Columbia University and was still running with the New York Athletic Club. Between 1927 and 1928, a Proudfoot traveling fellowship allowed him to study Roman philosophy, Old French, and Provençal at the University of Paris. In France, he encounters modern art, such like Picasso, Brancusi, and Braque, and modern literature like Yeats, Eliot, and most notably Joyce for the first time. Then, Joseph transfers to the University of Munich to study Sanskrit literature and Indo-European philosophy, where he discovers the work from Freud, Judd, Thomas Mann, and Goethe. In 1929, he returns to the United States and retires to Woodstock, where he keeps on reading about what he learned in France. 2 years later, he decides to go on a cross-country road trip to think about his future. During this trip, he stops in San Jose, California to visit his old friend Aline Davids, and she introduces him to John and Carol Steinbeck, as well as their neighbor biologist Ed Ricketts. With Ricketts, he travels up the coast of British Columbia to Alaska collecting intertidal fauna, an experience which confirms his belief between the relationship of mythology and biology. In 1933, after applying to 85 colleges and universities, he accepts a job offer from his old headmaster at Canterbury Prep School, where he teaches for a year. Joseph is then invited to teach at the recently founded Sarah Lawrence College. He immediately accepts and remains in the literature department for the next 38 years. 4 years later, Campbell marries Jean Erdmann, his former student and a member of the Martha Graham Dance Company. In 1941, he meets ideologist Heinrich Zimmer, who gets Joseph his first publication. Just 3 years later, Zimmer suddenly dies of pneumonia, and his widow asks Campbell to edit Zimmer's writing, to which he devotes the next 20 years to. Then, in 1944, he begins work on his own book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. 5 years later, after revision and rejection by 2 publishers, then The Hero with 1,000 Faces is published in the Bolinian series, and it is given an award by the National Institute of Arts and Letters. After, Campbell is appointed as president of the Creative Film Foundation. On 1972, he publishes Myths to Live By, a collection of lectures delivered at the Cooper Union in New York City. 1978, Campbell receives an honorary doctorate from the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. Then he is befriended with the filmmaker George Lucas and is invited to the Skywalker Ranch to see the Star Wars trilogy, which was greatly influenced by his work. In 1985, he is awarded the Medal of Honors for Literature by the National Arts Club of New York for The Way of the Animal Power. In 1987, the New Directors New Film Festival at the Museum of Art in New York hosts the premiere of The Hero's Journey, The World of Joseph Campbell. On October 30th, 1987, Joseph Campbell dies on Honolulu, Hawaii. On 1997, right after his death, the PBS series The Power of Myth with Bill Moyers airs based on Joseph Campbell's work. Now, that was a quick look at Joseph Campbell's life, but if he's remembered for one thing, it's the monomyth he explains in his early book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. Usually you start with a hero that is in a situation that he's not comfortable with and he must do something. Then we have the call for adventure, where it's clear that something must be done. Right after is the stage of refusal to the call, where the hero knows he must do something, but he's completely overcome by fear.
I can't do this.
The next stage is overcoming this fear, and this usually comes with a meeting of a mentor.
At last.
Next is crossing the threshold, and this is basically where the beginning of the story is over, and now the story actually begins.
We're in.
The next stage after this is where the hero tries to find out who his friends are, who his enemies are, and starts experimenting and testing the boundaries of his new world.
Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible.
The next stage is where the hero is now feeling comfortable in his new world, and now he is ready for the big task, big thing that he has to do.
What are you doing?
I'm going in.
But it still has a little bit of time for preparation.
Guns. Lots of guns.
After we have the stage where the hero must actually face his fear, and this is the big task that he must accomplish, and usually this task has something to do with death, where there is a chance that he could die. And of course there's a payoff or a reward at the end if the hero survives this task. The next stage is basically when the hero is finishing everything up and is getting ready to go home. He's basically getting all his stuff back, his life back together, and ready to go back to his regular life.
What is he doing?
He's beginning to believe.
The stage after this is the resurrection, where the hero thought everything was done, but instead he must face death much more in his face, kind of a way. And he's really tested about everything that he has learned through his journey the entire time. And then this leads us to the final stage, where the hero actually returns with something that can change life, with something big. He's returning with his big reward. So the big idea here is that the hero must travel somewhere learn something about himself and everybody, and then bring this back to share with everyone else. This is the legacy that Joseph Campbell has left. It can be seen in nearly all forms of modern storytelling, from novels to comic books to motion pictures. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show, and like Joseph Campbell once said, follow your bliss, and your world will open doors where there were only walls. And remember, the big question is if you will be able to say a big yes to when your adventure comes. Thank you and good night.